last couple of segments here. We're going to talk about the Professional Women's Hockey League. And Dad, I have a question today for you: as how big is it that women finally have a hockey league, and what does this mean for the future women who want to play college hockey?
All right, so I've watched the PWHL, I would say, a handful of times, and I kind of talked about this last night actually at a hockey get together that I was at. I looked at the league, and I think if you look at it from a fan perspective, I mean, all the other beneficial factors, like it's going to really grow women's hockey in America. It certainly is, right?
Yeah.
With all the media outlets that are available these days, they're going to be able to reach a bunch of kids and girls that they normally wouldn't have done probably in years past,
Yes.
right? So getting the word out, getting a fan base built is probably going to happen, right?
Yeah.
I think women's hockey in the United States has grown tremendously. I mean, if you look at women's hockey at youth organizations, there's now several teams. You look at it at the college level.
And you've coached some that are playing college right now.
That's correct. If you look at it from the college level, I mean, just about every major D1 college that has a men's hockey team has a women's team as well. So that's going to be the feeding ground, right? That's going to feed a professional league like that.
And I think,
and if you look at it, one of our friends had a good point. You know, the men's professional organization, they've had like what, 70, 80 years of lead time
to really
develop
build, and
base.
You can give the women the same amount of time, because it kind of goes into our other question here. With the PWHL only has 6 teams, because they only have 6 teams right now.
Yeah.
Do we see them expand eventually? I think we do.
I'm pretty sure we do. And here, I got a little background. I did a little research on this league.
Go for it.
The Dodgers owner, I don't know, I forget his name, but he's the owner of the league. They own that league. And there's a couple of important tidbits that are part of the league that they want to expand, and I'll tell you what they are. He's giving, I think him and his leadership group have given the teams generic names. And the reason why he wants to do that is he plans on selling all of the teams to franchise owners, and then the franchise owners
can
turn that into their own team. For instance, and they can put a team, they can put a mascot to it, they can start all the merchandising, they can go all through all the marketing programs that they do. And so he's made that generic in a way so that he can attract investors to invest in to the league itself. And once that investment comes in, then you'll see the league expand with all of their programs.
Mm-hmm.
And then the success of those teams is going to spawn new teams.
Yeah.
And a new expansion, right, to new markets. So I think, from my perspective, there's plenty of youth hockey, organizations that have girl programs across the nation, and I think that is probably growing. So the viewership is going to be there, and the attendance is going to be there, and I think the money is going to be there.
I think you look 4 to 5 years down the line, they're going to grow bigger and bigger every year. I think.
True.
And and I'm happy with the where they have the teams. They have one in Toronto, Ottawa, Boston. They have one in New York, Minnesota. These are teams. Montreal. I just named all 6. I'm pretty proud of myself for that. But all those teams that they put have hardcore fan bases to really get interest going. Minnesota will you will always draw hockey in Minnesota. You will always draw hockey in New York because people are so curious about it. Canada is a no-brainer. Hockey in Canada is huge. So I think that's smart where they put the cities. And I think that is what's going to continue to grow the game is finding cities that have the hardcore fan bases that can grow to larger audience, such as we've seen with that. When the Stars first got to Texas, no one cared about them.
That's true.
And it took them a time because Mavs and Cowboys. Now it took them a bit to get as big as the Mavs and Cowboys.
That's true.
So I think you just give it some time. I think the women's hockey league can really grow.
I agree. And I think ultimately, if you look at the product, like the product itself, is it watchable?
It is.
Is it as exciting?
It is.
It is. It is.
We've seen it.
Yeah, it's actually really, really good hockey. The girls are extremely talented. So from a viewership perspective and just as a fan, it's good hockey to watch.
Oh yeah, and so we'll kind of wrap it up here. But Dad, you've played for a number of years, and back in college hockey, how has it expanded since you stopped playing since college? Like, where is you? Because, and I'm kind of mixing a bunch of questions together, but like the technology and the sticks and everything, every gear that's changed since you stopped.
Oh,
since you
sure. I mean, I
left
can
college.
touch on just about every little topic. Like first and foremost, the game's completely changed, right? Ultimately, the game's changed because the rules have changed.
Yeah.
Like back in my era, it was a bruising, tough type of sport where hooking and holding was common, and only the flagrant
was really called.
Yeah, infractions were called. Of course, the equipment, modern technology, certainly skates and sticks and all that has gotten lighter and stronger, and that's added great performance to people's skating ability and shooting ability. Certainly that came at an extreme expense because everything's so expensive now, but so that's taken some of the, I would say, it's become an expensive sport to develop your kid in. But as far as those things are concerned, those technology updates to the game has allowed for the development. That's why you see players like McDavid, I mean, and you see Matthews and all these players are like, oh my God, they're just incredibly talented. And you compare them to like people like Gretzky, and you're like, oh God, that's no comparison, but it's the era that they were in.
Yeah,
it's the technology those guys were using.
And that's what bothers me when the people are like, oh yeah, Gretzky can never play in McDavid's era. It's like you can't put two different eras together like that, because it's like the NBA, it's like the NBA. They're like, oh, can Jordan play in LeBron's era? It's like, no, you can't compare those, because talent. The adage is true. Talent plays out in any era. However, you missing all these factors. Like back when Gretzky played, goalies really never went down. Back when you played, goalies didn't go down.
Yeah,
Rarely
the butterfly was never invented back then.
I think Hasek was really the first one to invent that.
Yeah, so like a lot of new techniques and new things have been developed over the years. I don't think college hockey, I really don't, other than, new colleges developing new programs, I don't think college hockey has expanded as much. There's been a bunch of D3 teams that have moved into a D1 program, certainly. But as far as like expansion of college hockey, I don't think, other than programs offered like like club college hockey programs, certainly that's probably one place that's, I would say, has grown.
Yeah.
Just giving more opportunities for kids to continue to play hockey after high school. But as far as it expanding, like somewhat like the NHL or maybe the PWHL, I don't think there's been a lot of expansion there. Yeah. So from that perspective, I don't really see any updates. I think the biggest thing in hockey, I mean, if you're a gear guy and you like hockey equipment, certainly the technology is night and day. Yeah. From that perspective.
Yeah. And they're always coming up with new stuff.
They're coming up with new stuff, but it, from my era to now, modern day, it's the equipment I use is, if I had that back then,
it would be so much different.
I would be a way better player just because of the equipment I used.
All right. So for our last question, we're going to go over time here, which is fine. For our last question, Kurt, you play with guys like Brett Hedican, with like against Phil Housley. Did you know that those guys were going to be as good? Like, did you know those guys were going to go to the NHL and be as good as they were, or were you kind of like, we're kids, we don't know what's going to happen?
Yeah, I didn't play with Phil Housley.
You played against him.
I watched him play. But I did play with Brett Hedican. And I've played with other players as well. But when you're in high school and 16 years old, and they're 16 or they're a year or two older or younger, yeah, they look like better players. But do they look like they're going to be 17-year veterans in the NHL?
No, they don't.
I mean, when you're a kid looking across the table or playing in a pickup game with them, do you know wow, that guy skates just a little bit faster than me, or
It's not noticeable.
Yeah, does that translate to, me getting a day-to-day job and them playing 17 years in the NHL? I don't really know. I can tell you that it's not always the case, because I've coached youth players in Austin, Texas, where I thought those players were so much better than the kids in their age group. And I thought, is this what like NHL talent looks like at the youth level? Is this player going to eventually become a 17-year veteran? And those are the kinds I think about at a youth level, because these kids are like, they're just owning their level. But none of that has taken place. I've never coached a kid who I thought had some elite skill at that age, and then eventually became an elite player at the NHL level.
The only guy that I can think of, and I think I know who I'm alluding to, he plays in the ECHL for the Wheeling Nailers, Josh Victor.
Yeah.
He's the only guy that you've coached that's really gone somewhere in the ECHL. Like it's not the NHL, it's not the AHL, but it's still a high professional league.
Yeah, and he was just a standard good player at the Bantam midget level, and he wasn't anything special.
Yeah,
but
that alludes to your point. Like you haven't seen.
That's my point.
Like elite talent, but sometimes you don't need to see elite talent for a guy to make it.
True, and sometimes those players bloom late, like after they leave the youth program. So you just can never know. I don't think there's a magic bullet or a special formula.
No, there never is.
To be able to predict somebody's ceiling. And that's why I'm not a scout, because I can't see that, right? And that's what a scout does, right?
Yeah, he recognizes the talent when no one else can.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. Obviously, we'd love to keep talking about hockey because it's the game I grew up playing. Dad, you grew up playing. It's a game that we've loved for ever. We still watch to this day. We're probably going to end up watching the Stars later today. But, I mean, that's all the time we got for it. Kurt, thank you for joining me on this. Obviously, as my dad, I love you. But thank you so much for joining me.
All right. Thanks for having me, Matthew.